Well, welcome back, everybody. I'm glad you decided to join us again. If you remember from last time, we had just gotten access to the Count's rather extensive library. He is at Death's doorstep, and Death is at his doorstep. Being present to collect the Count at a later date, he also gave us little information about the murders, which we were able to wring from his skeletal grasp. So we really had two leads that we could have followed up last time. The first is we now know the entrance to the sewers, which is where the moss that was found by our body came from. It was found to be a lycanthrope, which is just delightful. And because there is so much rain and so much flooding, we determined that this must be the area of the sewers it came from under Ankh-Morpork, because almost everything else would be flooded.
A shallow sewer running from the brass bridge and then around the rimward edge of the patrician's palace.
However, we elected to follow up our other lead, which was to see if Carada would deign to meet us at the Cafe Ankh like we instructed her to, or like we had the butler instruct her to. We haven't really talked to her since we found out that she was the one who werewolfed us, and so I imagine we'll have a fair bit to say. Looks like
You wanted
she
to
is here.
see me.
I tried to reach you at the mansion, but you're never around when I need you.
You never need me when I'm around.
A funny thing happened to me the other day.
You arranged all this just to tell me an anecdote?
It's a funny little story. I think you'll like it.
I'm listening.
The other night, someone stuck a sword through my ribs.
Ah, it must have been someone who knew you well.
The thing is, not long afterwards, I was in my coffin thinking about it when I realized I wasn't dead.
That was lucky.
Luck was not a factor. Why did you do it, Carlotta?
Do what?
Make me a werewolf.
If I hadn't, you'd be dead. Would you prefer that?
That's not the point, and you know it. You did something to me that was going to change who I was for the rest of my life, and you didn't even tell me.
I didn't think you'd understand. Besides, it wasn't as if I planned it.
Are you telling me you turned me into a werewolf by accident?
How long have you been a werewolf now?
Not long.
Have you felt what it's like? That force that pulls on you, that draws your attention to every jugular, pulsing with life? The irrepressible call of fresh blood? A sudden attention to the phases of the moon?
I have to fight to keep control.
We all do. Coming to a city of 1 million people, it's like a starving monkey wandering into a banana plantation. You learn to live with it.
And you decided to infect me with lycanthropy?
Infect is such a negative word. I prefer blessed.
You think this is a gift?
Of course it's a gift. It's the greatest gift I could give to someone. And I chose you.
Why?
You're a smart man, Luton. Figure it out.
Well, it just keeps getting deeper and deeper with her. I like how she wasn't going to admit to werewolfing us unless she knew that we knew what had happened to us. You know, knowing us, we might well have walked in and just started bluffing to see what we could get her to admit, but she wasn't going to fall for that. So, in terms of what there actually is to ask her about, though, I don't know that we have a whole lot that we haven't discussed. It'd be good to talk about the golden sword a bit, seeing as how we found it and it was later stuck in us.
I take it you don't know where the golden sword is now.
Of course not. Do you think I wouldn't tell you?
Frankly, my dear, I don't know what to think.
Yeah, I think it's probably up in the air whether she would tell us or just go get it herself. So I'm still completely in the dark as to how much to trust her at this point. Let's see, she's probably not going to care about the deaths, but let's see what she knows about the killing.
So level with me. What do you really know about the counterweight killings?
Nothing, I swear.
I swear all the time. But that doesn't mean you can trust me.
And individual deaths, she probably has even less to say.
Can you tell me anything about Matham's murder?
No.
Yep. Anyway, so she apparently thinks that the lycanthropy is an amazing gift, which I think we might disagree about. However, I guess we were always sort of on edge anyway, so maybe we're used to controlling our darker impulses, who knows.
Have you seen anything strange around town recently?
What kind of strange?
A little birdie eater told me that Malachite was killed by something bestial.
A werewolf?
I don't think so. Whatever, it was vicious.
You don't think werewolves are vicious? You should hear my aunts talk about me behind my back.
I think whatever this thing is, it's more powerful than just a werewolf.
Yeah. So she doesn't seem to have much information, but you basically have to squeeze it out of her. We've already kind of covered this, but...
So, how many people have you killed?
I'm not that kind of a werewolf.
I suspected you were a killer even when you were just a woman. Now, I'm certain of it.
I was never just a woman.
You expect me to believe you've never killed anyone?
I have a lot of self-control.
It didn't seem that way when we kissed.
Don't mistake passion for a lack of self-control.
Do all werewolves see the world the same?
Everyone sees the world differently, Luton. That's what life is all about.
I meant the colors. Do you see the same colors I do?
What color is the smell of the river Ankh to you?
A kind of cacophonous bright green.
I guess we do then.
Whoever killed me had a distinctive magenta scent. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?
Doesn't ring any bells.
There was something else about it, like a kind of fluorescent sparkle.
Like a greenish yellow-purple?
That's the one.
That's octarine.
Octarine? Sounds like a type of fruit.
It's the 8th color of the spectrum.
8th?
The basic color of which other colors are merely pale shadows impinging on conventional reality. The color of magic.
Conventional reality?
Or what passes for conventional on the Discworld.
What's that supposed to mean?
If I always knew what I meant, I'd be a genius.
So what smells of octarine?
Anything magical.
Then how come I've never seen it before? There must be 100 magical things in the city. Unseen University should glow like a sparkler.
Mortals can't see it, only wizards. Although we can smell it, of course.
That doesn't explain why Unseen University doesn't reek of it.
Well, it fades quickly in sunlight, and in extreme cases, walks away.
And I think Unseen University does have at least some octarine in it. We noticed that when we looked at the chalkboard there while we were investigating the death of Matham. So I don't think she probably has a whole lot else to say.
I wasn't about to ask Carada about herself.
Nothing new there. I think that's probably about all we can get from her for now.
Where can I find you?
I'll be around.
That's not very helpful.
What can I say? I go where I want to, with anybody I want. I just happen to be that kind of girl.
This isn't over, Carada.
I hope not. We don't have to be enemies, Luton.
We'll never be friends.
Let's not fight, Luton. We can work together, recover the sword together.
I don't know who you are anymore.
I'm the same girl I ever was, Luton. It's you that's changed.
You're telling me.
You know, Luton, you don't have to work with me. You don't have to say anything, and you don't have to do anything. Not a thing. Oh, maybe just howl. You know how to howl, don't you, Luton? You just pull your jaws apart and blow.
After Carlotta had left, I sat alone in the cafe, thinking about my problems. As bad as it seemed, my life was still better than it was a few years ago. Back then, I would have sat alone in the cafe, drinking through my problems.
So Carlotta is extremely interesting. We know that she knows more than she's saying, that much is clear, and she's in it for herself, and she's sort of bald-faced about this, but she's fairly perceptive, too. She brings up the fact that no one's really forcing us to continue to work on this case. I mean, we're getting paid for some of it, the part that relates to the Count, but I get the impression that that's more of a justification for Luton. He wants to be working on this case because, well, Ilsa's involved, Carlotta's involved, and as much as he denigrates women and sort of puts down on them, they're really sort of the driving force in his life at this point. I would argue that the two strongest characters in the game are, well, Ilsa at least got us to do what she wanted, so I guess she's strong. And Carlotta is probably, to our knowledge right now, the strongest female character. Stronger than us, that's for
The
sure.
ancient civic plans from the library led me straight to the sewer's entrance, not far from the Mortland Bridge. A relatively small tunnel was concealed beneath a pile of debris that must have accumulated over the centuries. It looked as if most of the tunnels here were actually still above the water line, or the sludge line, to be more honest about it.
Yeah, the sewers in Ankh-Morpork would smell awful. As I was going to say, that is something that I do appreciate about the game. Film noir in general is actually fairly good about having female characters not just be window dressing or damsels in distress to rescue, although the earlier ones certainly played into that. But on the flip side, sometimes they go with the femme fatale image, and that ends up being just sort of women are no good. It's this very pessimistic view of women as either they're damsels or they are, corruptible and corrupted sirens who sort of ensnare men and make them do their bidding. And what I think is fun is that's actually Luton's view, and he just happens to be some shade of wrong about it. I mean, that could fit Carada, but it seems like Ilsa at least genuinely cares for the person that she's with. She's an imperfect character, but, well, who's not? She's got wants and desires and works to affect them. We're more adrift than anybody else. I mean, we just got turned into a werewolf, and that wasn't enough to shake us off the case. I guess you could argue it's just a PI's stubbornness, but I think I see something else in Luton. Maybe there's something emerging, or maybe it's just the awful case of protagonism that he's managed to catch. Well, enough of that. Let's see what we have else down here in the sewer.
I wasn't even sure it really was water.
I think probably not. It's amazing that it flows through the pipes. Okay, so we've got exits all over the place. We've got no real way to tell what happened. Looks like this grating here fell off this pipe up here. But this is just sort of another little check to make sure that you've mastered the new game dynamics. Do you know to turn into a werewolf? If you do, congrats. As you can see,
The trail that I had seen in the cemetery seemed to continue down in the sewers, starting at one of the pipes and disappearing into the passageways. It was almost drowned out by the smell of the ankh, though.
that's right. Whatever it is, it's small enough to fit through a narrow pipe like this, so it's obviously either fairly athletic or able to change its shape or something. Anyway, we can follow the trail.
The trail that I had seen in the cemetery seemed to continue down in the sewers, starting at one of the pipes and disappearing into the passageways. It was almost drowned out by the smell of the ankh, though.
Now, this is the one criticism I might make of this section, which is that we have to go into werewolf mode and follow the trail just to get here. It'll keep us circling in that last screen we saw infinitely otherwise. Maybe I'm wrong. I was going to say, but you have to follow it again to get to the lair, but
The lair was concealed in one of the sewer's many niches.
well, shut me up. Here it is. Anyway. There's another way to get to the lair is to turn into werewolf mode again and follow the purple Octarine trail up to here. But, yeah, we learn something new every time we play the games, folks, is what I'm saying to conceal my ignorance. So this looks like what we found in the Milka. It looks like it's assembled some straw and debris of various natures.
There was all manner of debris piled up inside the niche. It looked like some kind of nest.
Yeah, again, this isn't very werewolfy.
Amongst the garbage was some kind of pendant.
Interesting. So we move this little that log over there, and here's a pendant.
The metal of the pendant glinted amongst the debris.
And it's got some kind of scarab design on it.
As I stood in the alcove examining the pendant, I felt as if I wasn't alone. It was the same presence I'd felt in the Milka's hold. I could feel the cold touch of death upon me. It was a strangely light touch.
Yep.
Size obviously isn't important, I agree. You are Death, right? Rats have their own death? No offense. I mean, you're very, very intimidating. For a skeletal rat, at least.
Well, there we have it, the Grim Squeaker. If people have read the Discworld books, you'll know that there was a kerfuffle with Death at one point in time, in which he was briefly stripped of his powers. If I'm not mistaken, this all happens in Reaper Man, which was one of my favorite books of the series. And there was briefly a death of many different kinds of things, a death of horses and a death of trolls and whatnot. And they were collected back into regular death, except for the death of rats who managed to escape, and has made little appearances in the books since then.
So, do you come here often? I'm sorry, it's not easy to think of things to say to something like you. Well, it's not often I find myself in the sewers talking to a... What are you exactly? Exactly.
Right. So I guess sort of the gimmick here is that Luton can understand the Grim Squeaker. I don't know if he's referred to that in the books or not, or if that's just a thing that they do for here. But we obviously cannot.
So what's your connection to the big guy? You're sort of like relatives, then. You probably get together for birthdays and Hogwatch night. I'd like to see that. If you don't mind me asking, were you on the Milka before? I thought so. What were you doing on the Milka? Uh-huh. No, please, go on. Did you see anything? Well, I don't know, anything unusual. Anything else? And that's here. This is its lair. It can't be very big. That's not very comforting. But I guess that's not your job. But comfort, I mean. I wasn't suggesting you weren't good at your job. I've never looked at it that way before. I couldn't believe it. I was talking to a phantasmal rodent. I hoped he couldn't read my thoughts. He seems easily offended.
He does seem to have sort of a Napoleon complex about him.
So, what's it like being the death of rats? You don't get to talk much, do you?
I guess he wouldn't. You know, I guess it makes sense that he showed up both on the Milka and down here in the sewers if whatever that thing is needs to eat. You'd think it could go through kind of a large number of rats, so I assume it would be needed in both places. So the only real things that I think that he might know anything about are if he was on the boat with the bestial attacker on the Milka.
Do you think there's a connection between the creature who made these nests and the beast that killed Malachite and the beast that killed me? Can't you give me a little help? No, I understand. Professional ethics and all.
Yeah, unfortunately he seems every bit as recalcitrant as regular Death is about this kind of thing. So if he doesn't know anything about the pendant...
I found this in the nest. Do you know anything about it? It was on the Milka, so this thing brought it here for some reason. I could really use some help, you know. Oh, forget I asked.
There's really not much for us to say.
Well, it was nice meeting you. I have to get going. It's not like that. I have a lot of work to do. You too, huh?
Gonna be honest, I'm actually not the biggest fan of the Grim Squeaker. The reason being he is completely useless. You don't have to talk to him at all. He gives you nothing of value. You found the pendant just by being down there, and I don't really feel like he gives you any significant leads. The only thing you might say, here I'll just illustrate here, if you go through the wrong passageway, if you don't trace the scent, then it just kicks you back to the beginning, or kicks you back to the other room in here. Anyway, if you trace the scent, then you get to the lair. Then he mentioned something about how, Luton mentioned something about how it looks a lot like the lair they found on the Milka. And that, I think, ought to be enough to tie the Milka to the pendant we find there. And that's really all that the rat gives us, is that whatever it was on the Milka has also made this nest, and now we don't know that to be the bestial attacker that attacked us, but I think that's a fair guess at this point in time. And the only real thing of worth that we can get from that is that it seems like whatever was on the Milka had the pendant. And the reason that I think it might be interesting to know that that pendant came from the Milka is that that means it came across with a lot, at least potentially, of other artifacts, Sortian things. I'm not really sure where the guards went, although I guess there's nothing important to guard around here anyway. And so, seeing as it's from some sort of archaeological dig, I think it's a fair bet, or at least possible, that we might learn something about it from our old friend Two Conkers.
Can I ask you a few questions?
Well, we are a little busy at the moment. Can it wait?
How long?
Just a day or so.
No, then it can't wait.
Very well. What did you want to know?
Do either of you recognize this?
Is of much familiarness.
From where?
Near sort being somewhere near. Ah, yesness. Seal on temple in Alkali.
It's the seal on the doors of a temple?
May I see?
Sure, why not?
Ah, yes. I recognize that. That's from the temple with the intricate door locking mechanism, isn't it? Quite a marvel of technology for the era it was built, those doors. I was very impressed with them. Now, what was the name of the god it was dedicated to? I can't quite remember.
I know.
I'm sure you do, but give me a moment and it'll come to me.
I think he meant it's from the temple of Anu Anu.
Ah, yes. I remember. The temple of Anu Anu at Al-Khali. A lovely building.
And this is a replica of the seal.
Of much sureness. Replica of most exactitude.
That might be helpful to know. Thanks.
Well, that is something very interesting. So the Temple of Anu Anu at Al-Khali. Now we know that the trail, the trail of the serial killer, stopped right outside the stained glass window right by Mooncalf. Mooncalf, of course, being the devotee of the god Anu Anu. And we're also being tailed by a dwarf who calls himself Al-Khali. So I feel like a lot of threads are beginning to tie together.
Just a few more questions, if you wouldn't mind.
Now, we did just learn about this new Temple of Anu Anu at Al-Khali. So let's see if there's anything else they can tell us.
Is there anything else you can remember about the Temple of Anu Anu at Al-Khali?
I'm afraid all I was interested in was the mechanism that operated the door. There was a complicated method of opening the temple doors involving applying pressure and twisting the temple's seal. I didn't really pay any attention to anything else.
Do you remember the method?
Oh, now, that was years ago. I'm sure you could look it up somewhere, though.
Anything else?
It is to be abandoning.
The temple is going to be abandoned?
No, it's to be abandoning in the nowness.
It's abandoned.
That is of the most truthy flavor.
Do you mean it's been abandoned for centuries?
Of much error, no. Abandoning of the weeks.
They abandoned it a few weeks ago.
Your truth is whole.
Why would the followers of Anu Anu stay here in the Temple of Small Gods if there was a magnificent temple in Al-Khali they could go to?
Not to be knowing by me.
Now that is fascinating.
I decided to leave them to their work. I doubted they even noticed I was gone.
Probably not, Luton. So, it looks like whatever that pendant was that was valued by the serial killer comes from the Temple of Anu Anu at Al-Khali, which was abandoned mere weeks ago. Not only that, but it looks like an influential figure in the cult of Anu Anu is present here in the city and is in some way potentially tied or being watched by our serial killer. The plot thickens. Now, they did give us a pretty obvious clue when they said that we ought to be able to look up
Who would Sir like to see this time?
something about the temple.
I'd like to use the library again.
Very well. I will show Sir the way, since it seems the labyrinthine corridors of this vast edifice are beyond Sir's meager navigational skills.
You can get there yourself, and I might do that in the future, just to stick it to the butler. Now, if we had just tried to look up the pendant before going and getting any information about the Temple of Anu Anu,
There were books on jewelry, but I couldn't find the pendant in any of them. I did get the idea that the design of the pendant might match something else, though.
and Luton does his best, but he's unable to work with so scant clues. No, we need to know about the Temple of Anu Anu. Those are some weird
There
braces.
was a book in the library called Frescoes and Fatal Traps of the Temple of Al-Kali. But when I turned to the page on the door mechanism, it had been torn out by someone. I was going to have to find another copy of the book. There were only 2 other libraries in Ankh-Morpork that I knew about, and one of those was in the Assassin's Guild.
Rats. Well, we've hit a dead end. Alright, well, this is where I think we're going to end this update with a lot more information and some new leads. And so the question I have for you is, there are 2 potential things I could think of to do. One would be to head to the Temple of Small Gods and question Mooncalf and heaven help us Maleclips about the happenings of the Temple of Anu Anu, its recent abandonment, the pendant we found, and etc. And the second is, we could go after the second library, not the one in the Guild of Assassins, the one at the Unseen University, and try to somehow get their copy of the book and open the pendant. So I'll leave that decision up to you. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you later.